call a question, just raise your hand.
Last day of fall practice, we've been going since August 26th, and it's been great to see a highly ranked recruiting class and see us trying to get up off the mat and get back to doing what we've done a couple of years prior. Been a good healthy chip on our shoulder. Guys worked hard all fall. This is our last day of fall, so now our attention as a staff, and hopefully our players too, our attention turns to, what do we outline for us now that we're 86 days from our season opening, and a lion's share of these days of where people are going to be back, not being pushed as a group, but being left to their own devices as individuals. And what can we outline for these guys, and how can they get some self-motivation leading till we come back January 13th and have those 5 weeks getting ready to open up on February 14th.
I guess just starting with Eric, I know his ball stats really pop off the page, but just what did you see from Eric this fall? How do you feel like he grew, and just what really stuck out?
Yeah, we've done player evaluations. Those have been collected as of yesterday, and I look forward to pouring through those. But I think the word that I would put by Eric, you hit 500, just it's 20 or so opportunities of games per se with his at bats. Consistency would be the word I'd put next to him, and it was consistent defensively. Lion's share of everything's either been shortstop or third base or the left side. I think we felt like we need to get better there. We talked about pitching, but we felt like we need to get better on the left side. If you just look at him as an example, that's a guy that's coming off that knee surgery, devastating surgery, and maybe playing a season at 70%. He still has his brace on, played this fall with a brace, but man, he was closer to 100%. You can just see the range back in his game. But that consistency defensively, that consistency offensively kind of carried the day. I think that's what's going to come out in the fall evaluations was, I think from the start, guys had runs where they were, God, this guy was our best player for 2 weeks. And then somebody else would rise up for a couple of weeks. I think what Eric did was had our most consistent fall from start to finish. And I think that's what I'll remember, and I think that's what will bear out in evaluations with his teammates and coaches saying that about him.
How did you guys come out of the fall as far as injury-wise goes?
Yeah, pretty good. I think everybody's got a chance to track and be back. I think the one that we're trying to figure out right now, kind of a new one probably to introduce to you guys, is inconsistent as we're getting together, would be Mason Cook with a wrist injury. So we're trying to do the MRIs and figure out if that's something that will heal on its own here over the break, or do we need to do something? Do we need to do something here before the season to make sure that he's back? So we're not talking about like elbow or shoulder, we're talking about a wrist, and we're just trying to figure out how severe that injury is right now to the right course of action for him to not miss any season or miss as little a season as we can with that injury. So that one has my undivided attention. I think Eric will be out of the brace come spring, so I think he probably could be already, but just being safe with that. But I do think he gets to play a season without that brace. Ballou had missed some time, but came back late. Actually swung the bat great in the last fall World Series. So we feel like that oblique from the summer has gotten better. He's back to 100%. Bristol Carter, I don't think we saw quite the 100% version of him. He had surgery on his hand in July. And he just gritted and bared through it. But the last couple of weeks, I thought I saw more life in his body and the swing. So I appreciate him getting through the fall because I think it was good acclimation for him to his team, being a new team. And I don't feel like he's going to have to be coming back in January trying to get a swing going or trying to get caught up. I think by him gritting through this fall, that helps him tremendously from that standpoint. So all in all, Gatwood missed a few weeks. I hate it because it's so important for a freshman to get those 2 or 3 appearances. He'll throw live to hitters today and got to throw in this last World Series. So we've got to catch up on some missed outings with somebody like him. But all in all, from a college standpoint, it definitely was a challenge last year when Guevara went down in maybe your 1 and your 2. Speaking of Joseph Gonzalez, for sure. But right now we're in a pretty good place going into the break.
Expecting Cooper back fairly soon.
Yeah, should have mentioned him in these comments. He's been catching the ball, taking ground balls each and every day, and that fracture, we've kept that piece on. So I think he's probably out of that in another week, and then he's one that just needs to do a great job. He's done a great job with his body, and actually had a player, I told Cooper this yesterday, helping him learn how to play first base. A lot of these guys are third basemen, shortstops where they come from, and maybe had to work at first base a few times. Tanner Waldrop was a new player that played a lot of first base this fall, and he complimented Cooper. Instead of him being in the dugout or on the training table, he would always go to first base and be as engaged and involved, and like being another coach, helping him to stay involved. So I appreciate Cooper's investment with that. But I have, that's an incumbent there that absolutely you feel like you got a good defender, a double-digit home run guy, a 60-plus RBI guy, because that's been the recent track record instead of dreaming on somebody. So as excited as we've been about the fall, having Cooper back, because he really didn't participate in any this fall, is exciting. But he'll probably start in another week getting more adventurous with some things. But he's been doing what he could, and he really invested in being a leader this fall, so I appreciate that.
Jason.
What do you and the staff learn about this team throughout the fall? You had a lot of competition. Like anything that jumps out to you is like, hey, that's something we kind of figured out about this group.
With so many new pieces, the freshmen, I knew that group was close because they stayed together. They committed. We never had that many guys make it to campus. So they did something within their own little rank of getting here. So we knew that was a pocket of closeness, but I think Irish, I think Fabian, I think McMurray for sure, Parker Carlson. Ben Shore is an amazing leader when you start asking people to say who is a valued team member. That's another collection of guys with the returners and maybe the portal guys, the new transfers that come in. I think I've been most excited about how the groups have meshed, and I think we've really tried to do that, because when you don't have a good season, the first thing you think about, like, we got to get them closer. In that freshman group, those guys I mentioned, all those pieces coming in that are new, I think we've done a good job of doing that. I think with the construction, one positive is having to play the 2 outside competitions on the road, already being in a hotel, already taking a couple of trips. I think that helped us a little bit as well. But I think that's one of my positives of the fall is I don't feel like anybody's pulling at one another, or I have 2 or 3 factions in the locker room or anything like that. And I think that was sincerely important. Going out and doing the best job we could recruiting was job number 1. Getting here and trying to see how close you can get a roster has been number 2, and I feel pretty good about that this fall.
Which you mentioned a couple of spots defensively. How do you feel about the whole group, defensively? And is there any area of concern? Irish's development as a catcher from the people that have come in and watched, from our evaluation and our work. I think he's continued to grow as a catcher. I think we would have saw it more last year, but for a month he really couldn't get back there and catch, and that's where Cal Strickland got a lot of experience. So I think between Ike feeling great, because when you ask the question, I need to start as close to home plate as possible. Irish and Strickland just absolutely caught their hearts out. Steele and Freilich are a couple other guys that absolutely are catchers by trade that come in here. So we feel like we have great depth there, but I'm happy to report that Ike has played some in the outfield, but it's been because we're trying to give him a break at catcher. That's how good he's caught. The throwing's been great, the receiving's been great, and I think just the growth and maturity now into year 3 is what you want to see with a number 1 catcher, is him communicating and leading the pitcher out in front of him. It's not just your skills, it's leading that pitcher and a pitching staff. So that's the area that I think he's really growing in. getting Cooper back at first, we played a ton of guys, a plethora. I was with Coach Baird this morning, so I can say words like plethora. We've played a ton of guys there, but knowing that Cooper's got a good first chance at that. But Terrell's played there some, and we even had Fabian there a day or two in the fall of making sure that we can really defend at that position. The infield still got to be settled. We overplayed guys different positions because trying to forecast a potential for injury or anything. But I think Eric Snow could play shortstop for us. I think Eric Guevara could play shortstop for us. I think Derek Fabian can absolutely play shortstop for us. And not every college team feels like they have that. And they also can play third and second because we move them around enough. Chris Rembert, where can we get this exciting freshman? We played him at second and the outfield. This feels like the first time Ballou has come on so much as like the center field position. I feel like we have two center fielders in Bristol Carter and Cade Ballou. That's really nice. If Ike stays at catcher, then there's a job to be had. Is it Bub Terrell, a freshman there? It just feels like Rembert, Terrell, and Fralick. Fralick struck out 3 times, the fewest amount of strikeouts on our roster. When freshmen start doing things like that, when Rembert has as many doubles as Ike Irish, you're going to have to start finding a way. We feel like we're going to play some of these young guys. That's how good. It's not just a top-rated class. That don't mean anything. What means something is when you get here and you feel like they can play and help now. That's when it's powerful. That's when you have a real recruiting class. It's not what you guys put out there or publications say this class is. It's when you go play an entire fall and go like, well, these guys are doing things on par with the guys that we're counting on. So those guys got to play. I need to throw Addison Klepsch in that. He wound up with double-digit RBI and just came on like gangbusters the last 3 weeks for us. And shortstop from California, freshman. Played short, had some throwing challenges early, moved him to the outfield. When we brought him back to the infield, it was phenomenal, and the bat got hot and played great. So there's 4 freshman position players that could play a lot with a lot of the returners that we're counting on. So it's hard in college baseball, but it's been hard my whole career. When we play in each other, 2 teams, we have not defended the 3 acres the way I wanted to. So much of what we advertised last year about the pitching challenges, but defending the field, the 3 acres has got to be, we can't just say we got all these bats and got a chance to have a dynamic offense. We got to make sure we can defend the field properly. And so I think we got 12 hitters that are ready to play SEC baseball from my experience. And I think it's going to be a battle once we get back for those 5 weeks. So those 3 that I said could play short, who's going to win it and who's going to move to the other spots. And when we come back in January, the musical chairs, the music stops, and you really need to get locked in for 4 weeks because that shortstop needs to really know who he's playing with at second. And that's why sometimes the injuries are so challenging, that we do a lot of that in the fall just in case something shakes out. But we've got to get the music stop, get into our spots, and really get ready for the season. And I think we have enough to defend the field. We got to balance like the offense and the defense, and the way we get back to doing what we did the 2 years before is to be sincerely better on the mound, and that's where I hope that we are ready to claim that. But we'll have to get out there and prove it.
Time for 2 more stalls on the line.
Yeah, going to the mound, talk about Sanders and Chatterton, their impact on this fall and how they came about this fall.
Yeah. Feels like they're competing for a rotation spot as freshmen and been in the league so long, you're like, man, but they pitched good enough to do it. We have had a couple of freshmen All-American in our time here. I think of Tanner Burns, I think of Cody Greenhill, a couple of guys that have done it. These guys have pitched in that manner, both of them. Sanders is so good; he gets ready so quick. If they're not starters to start the season, that means they stay healthy for these 86 days going into the season. But if they stay healthy, if they're not a starter, they're piggyback. I mean, even Major League Baseball is just over 5 innings a game on average now. So I think piggyback's here to stay. I'd like to come up with a better word for it, but a starter, a long reliever. I could see using those guys where Chatterton starts and Sanders could go behind him, and the next week they could flip, because we do have 4 weeks of non-conference play before we get to SEC play. Those guys have done an amazing job from a freshman standpoint, and go help us. I'd put Alvarez in that mode. You play 4 games a week. He's done an amazing job there too. But if I'm looking at 4 games a week, I cannot see us walking into it and not having a sincere role for Sanders, Chatterton, Alvarez, to be honest with you. You got guys like Gatwood that's got all the talent, just missing those appearances. He's absolutely somebody, if we talked at the 1st of February, where we could throw them in there and see a leap and jump there. But if you're just asking me, we made the biggest deal out of percentage of strikes this fall that had to be achieved to get to a certain level of acceptance and what we do expect with this group. And those guys met those benchmarks, and it's sometimes hard for a freshman to come in and really lean on the strike zone and try to end the at bat on every pitch. And those 3 guys did a great job of it.
You mentioned the depth at catcher, and I just wanted to ask you about Kale, and just maybe the growth that you've seen from him behind the plate, and just really what he brings you at that spot.
Yeah, he got to play more as a freshman than I thought, and I think that's been a blessing for him. I think he's also been in the household where his dad was a great catcher, was a great teacher, was a head coach in our league for a decade. He's taken a program to Omaha as a head coach. So growing up in that was a leg up, but I think the playing experience in this league last year for him he's a premium defender. Hit some balls hard right at people, but didn't have the offensive fall that he wanted. And I just kept trying to tell him what's important, what he needs to focus on, and keep going. But Cale Strickland's a winning ball player, and I think he's an exceptional SEC catcher. And I think he's there today. And I do think the experiences last year, he would have had all the technique, but I just think his heart rate's at a lower rate. He can really serve the pitchers, and he can catch a big game. He is the backstop. He can block, he can receive, and he's got a quick release, so he can throw. He's a pretty complete high-level college catcher, in my opinion.
And then I know you kind of touched on it with the freshmen, and I know it's way out, but just as far as your weekend rotation, I mean, just how are you feeling about the options that you guys have for that after fall ball and some of the guys who could maybe fit into those roles?
When I said strike percentage, Dylan Watts was a guy last year that he was all over the map. That's how unstable things were. I'd like to drive strike percentage, and I'd like to come in here with a second component of stability as we walk into the season. And I have more control over stability maybe than the strike percentage, except for on a daily basis of development. But Watts is a guy that absolutely feels like he's grown. Graves, they've met that standard of throwing strikes and being able to use those guys. That's a right and left, and we need all the left-handedness we can get. If we started today, the flag we're waving, who really won the competition, would be Samuel Dutton. He threw 72% strikes this last outing. He put together the best outing of the fall in this World Series. 4 pitches, looked the part. So I think he's expanded his playbook maybe, but he's a year older. So that's what's so exciting about Samuel. That's what we're chasing. So I'm going to put him up front because he won the competition, and the name might be replaced, and he's got a standard to live up to. But he did it at the front end of the game, and then somebody that's knocking on 70% out of the pen is Hayden Murphy. Hayden Murphy didn't have a good fall. He probably is going to be, I would imagine, the valuation is where he'd be our most valuable pitcher this fall. And he started coming on late last year where he started believing in the fastball. He's picked up the cutter. This is a good place to say where Hayden is really locked in. He's pursuing it. He can taste it now. I had him and Blake Burkhalter spending some time on the phone multiple times talking about that cutter, like him and Huddy figured out that cutter that kind of led us to Omaha, basically, in 22. Seeing something from the past kind of connect to it and see those guys hook up, Blake reinvest in us, and Hayden being hungry enough to go search it. It's the first time in a career he's taken those steps. It's good to see somebody starting to grow, feel it, and start reaching out and figuring out those strategies. And he filled it up and probably did our best job of that. But you know, Fisher's done great. I don't. There's names that I know people listen to this and they're like, "What about this guy and that guy?" We got a lot of guys that are capable. Fisher did a good job of just when you look at the start and the finish. We're chasing the outings that we actually saw, not just what somebody says somebody can do. Of Dutton on the front end and Murphy in the back end. And we're starting there, and we'll have another, 3 weeks of great squad games to kind of put the pieces in there. But a Fisher, a Dutton, a Chatterton, a Watts, a Sanders, and Alvarez, those are some names that we should be thinking about trying to put them in some specific orders where we can drive that strike percentage going into the season, and create some stability for our guys, and hopefully they'll do a good enough job to maintain that stability into the season.
All right, thank you,
Thanks,
Coach.
Butch.